Halloween and the Troll. The Great Hall had been transformed into what could only be described as a multicultural wonderland of accommodation. Orange and black decorations hung from the ceiling alongside prayer flags, indigenous dream catchers, and what appeared to be a decolonized Halloween banner that Hermione had somehow convinced the house elves to hang during dinner preparation. "This is incredible," Harry whispered to Ron as they entered the hall. "Look at all the different food options." The tables groaned under the weight of not just traditional Halloween fare, but an impressive spread of halal dishes, kosher options, vegan alternatives, and what appeared to be an entire section labelled culturally sensitive autumn celebration foods. Mrs. Alwaziri had clearly sent very specific instructions about Ramad's dietary needs, and Dumbledore had apparently taken this as a cue to accommodate every possible dietary restriction known to wizardkind. "Alan Jalila," Ramad said gratefully, loading his plate with properly prepared lamb and rice. "At least I won't starve tonight. Though I'm pretty sure that's not how you make kapsa," he added, eyeing a particularly suspicious-looking dish that had been labelled authentic Middle Eastern rice, halal certified by Hogwarts kitchen staff. Hermione was practically vibrating with excitement as she surveyed the feast. "This is exactly what I've been talking about. Finally, some real inclusivity at this school. Do you know how long I've been petitioning for acknowledgement of non-Christian holiday traditions?" "Hermione," Harry said gently, "it's still basically Halloween. They just added more food. Don't you see?" Hermione's eyes gleamed with the fervour of someone who had found her calling. "This is the beginning of dismantling centuries of oppressive holiday hierarchies. Next we'll tackle Christmas and its colonial implications." Professor Snape, who was passing by their section of the Gryffindor table, snorted loudly. "You're really gonna make everything about some political nonsense, ain't you? It's just food, gal. Eat it or don't, but quit preaching at the dinner table." The students around them fell silent. Harry felt their stomach drop. Even though Snape's attitude made them uncomfortable, they knew better than to challenge him publicly. "Professor Snape," Hermione began carefully, "I was simply expressing appreciation for the school's efforts to be more inclusive." "More inclusive, my ass," Snape interrupted, his voice carrying across several tables. "Half these kids don't even know what they're eating, but they're all pretending to be grateful for the cultural experience." He made air quotes with his fingers. "You'll want to feel good about yourselves without actually doing nothing meaningful." Ramad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Professor, I genuinely appreciate having food I can eat." Nah, little man," Snape said, not unkindly but with obvious amusement. "I ain't talking about you. You actually got legitimate dietary needs. I'm talking about Miss Social Justice over here acting like some lamb and rice gonna solve centuries of wizarding prejudice." Harry watched in fascination and horror as Hermione's face went through several shades of red. They could practically see her internal struggle between wanting to argue with Snape's crude dismissal of her activism and knowing that challenging him would likely backfire spectacularly. "Perhaps," came Dumbledore's wavering voice from the head table, "we could all take a moment to appreciate the wonderful diversity of our feast without engaging in divisive discourse." "Ain't nothing divisive about calling out performative nonsense when I see it," Snape replied cheerfully. "For sure, old man, whatever makes you sleep better at night." The awkward silence that followed was broken by Professor McGonagall clearing her throat loudly. "Yes, well, I believe we should focus on enjoying our meal and celebrating the evening's festivities." Draco Malfoy, who had been listening to the exchange with obvious glee, chose that moment to pipe up from the Slytherin table. "Finally, someone with the courage to speak truth to power. Professor Snape's absolutely right about all this virtue-signaling nonsense." The irony of Draco praising Snape while simultaneously demonstrating exactly the kind of entitled attitude that made everyone uncomfortable was not lost on anyone present. Snape himself looked at Draco with obvious disdain. "Boy, if you think I'm on your side, you got another thing coming," Snape said flatly. "Just because I don't got time for performative wokeness don't mean I got time for your whiny insult bullshit either." Draco's face went pale, then red. I wasn't. I don't know what you mean by." "Sure you don't," Snape said dismissively, turning away. "You'll enjoy your dinner." trying not to turn it into a philosophical debate about the patriarchy or nothing. As he walked away, Harry heard him mutter something about teenagers these days and can't even eat a meal without making it about their feelings. Well, Hermione said quietly, her voice tight with suppressed frustration, that was educational. He's not wrong about everything, Ramad said diplomatically. Sometimes people do focus more on looking good than actually helping. But he didn't have to be so harsh about it. The man called me a Miss Social Justice like it was an insult, Hermione hissed. I'm trying to make this school better for everyone. I know you are, Harry said soothingly. But maybe sometimes it's okay to just enjoy something without analyzing all its deeper meanings. Hermione looked at them as if they'd suggested she stop breathing. Harry, we can't just ignore the systems of oppression around us. The personal is political. Even dinner? Ramad asked, gesturing at his plate. Can't dinner just be dinner sometimes? Before Hermione could launch into what was clearly going to be a lengthy explanation about how food was inherently political, the great doors to the hall burst open with a tremendous crash. Professor Quirrell came sprinting in, his turban askew, his face pale with terror. Troll, he shrieked, pointing dramatically toward the entrance. Troll in the dungeons. He then proceeded to faint directly onto the floor, which would have been more convincing if he hadn't clearly positioned himself to fall onto the conveniently placed pile of cushions that had been set up for some reason near the head table. Immediately, the hall erupted into chaos. Students began screaming and pushing back from the tables. Some of the younger students started crying. The prefects looked around frantically, unsure of what to do. Silence. McGonagall's voice cut through the pandemonium. Everyone remained calm. But Dumbledore was already on his feet, his arms spread wide in what appeared to be a gesture of peaceful mediation. Now, everyone. Let's not react with fear and violence. Perhaps we should take a moment to understand this troll's perspective. The entire hall stared at him in disbelief. With respect, Headmaster, McGonagall said through gritted teeth, trolls are notoriously violent creatures with limited reasoning capacity. This is a matter of immediate safety, not conflict resolution. Ah, but Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore said gently, isn't that exactly the kind of prejudice thinking that has led to centuries of interspecies conflict? How do we know this troll hasn't simply lost its way? Perhaps it's seeking help or trying to communicate something important to us. Several students exchanged incredulous looks. Even Hermione, despite her commitment to social justice, seemed taken aback by Dumbledore's suggestion. Headmaster, Professor Flitwick squeaked nervously, trolls have been known to attack first and ask questions never. Student safety must be our primary concern. Of course, Dumbledore nodded sagely. But surely we can prioritize safety while also showing compassion for a lost and potentially frightened creature? I suggest we form a talking circle and... Oh, hell no, came Snape's voice from somewhere near the back of the hall. You can sit in a circle and sing Cumbaya with that troll if you want, but I'm getting these kids somewhere safe before it decides to use one of them as a toothpick. Professor Snape, Dumbledore said with gentle reproach, violence should always be our last resort. Perhaps if we... Crass. The sound of splintering wood echoed through the hall as something very large and very angry collided with the main doors. The troll, it seemed, had found them. Right, McGonagall said briskly, taking charge. Prefects, lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately. Teachers, with me. We'll handle the troll. But what about restorative justice? Dumbledore called out as McGonagall marched toward the doors. What about de-escalation techniques? You can de-escalate it after we make sure it doesn't eat any students. McGonagall snapped back. In the chaos that followed, students began streaming toward the exits. The prefects were trying to maintain order, but panic had well and truly set in. Harry found themselves swept along with the crowd, Ramad and Hermione pressed close beside them. This is insane, Harry muttered as they were pushed toward the door. Is Dumbledore actually suggesting we try to have a conversation with a troll? I mean, the principle of non-violent conflict resolution is admirable, Hermione said, though she sounded uncertain. But trolls aren't exactly known for their communication skills. They're known for their club skills, Ramad added grimly. And their people-smashing skills. As they reached the corridor, they could hear Dumbledore's voice echoing from the Great Hall. Now, let's all take a deep breath and consider how we might approach this situation with mindfulness and cultural sensitivity. His words were interrupted by a tremendous roar and the sound of a table being overturned. "That's it," they heard Snape say. "Somebody stupefy that fool before he gets us all killed. I got a troll to deal with." The corridor was packed with students all trying to get to their dormitories at once. Harry, Ramad, and Hermione found themselves pressed against the wall as older students pushed past them. "Wait," Hermione said suddenly, grabbing Harry's arm. "Where's Neville? I haven't seen him since dinner started." Harry felt their stomach drop. In all the chaos, they'd completely forgotten about other students who might not have made it out of the Great Hall. "He was sitting near the end of the table," Ramad said, looking around frantically. "I don't see him anywhere." "Oh no," Hermione breathed. "What if he's still in there? What if he's hiding under a table or something?" Harry felt a familiar surge of determination. They couldn't just leave a fellow student potentially trapped with a dangerous troll, no matter how much Dumbledore wanted to try talking to it. "We have to go back," Harry said. "Are you insane?" Ramad hissed. "There's a 12-foot troll in there with a club the size of a tree trunk." "We can't just leave Neville," Harry insisted. "What if he's hurt? What if he's scared?" Hermione was already nodding. "Harry's right. We have to at least check. If the teachers are handling the troll, maybe we can slip in and get Neville out safely." "This is a terrible idea," Ramad muttered, but he was already turning back toward the Great Hall. "My parents are going to kill me if I survive this. If we're doing this, we need to be smart about it." The three of them carefully made their way back through the now empty corridors. They could hear shouting and crashing from the direction of the Great Hall, along with what sounded like Dumbledore still trying to mediate between the teachers and the troll. "Is he seriously still trying to talk to that thing?" Harry whispered as they crept closer. "I think I hear him asking about its feelings," Hermione replied, looking simultaneously impressed and horrified by Dumbledore's commitment to non-violence. They peered around the corner into the Great Hall and immediately saw the problem. The troll was indeed massive, standing nearly 12 feet tall with arms like tree trunks and a club that looked like it had been carved from an entire oak tree. It was currently smashing tables with enthusiastic abandon while Dumbledore stood at a safe distance, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Now, friend troll," Dumbledore was saying in his most soothing voice, "I can see that you're upset about something. Would you like to share your feelings with us?" The troll responded by hurling a bench at him. Dumbledore dove behind the head table with surprising agility for someone his age. "Perhaps we could start with some basic communication." Dumbledore called out from behind his cover. One grunt for yes, 2 grunts for no. McGonagall and Snape were approaching the troll from either side, their wands raised. McGonagall looked like she was trying very hard not to curse her employer. "This is our chance," Harry whispered. "While it's distracted." They slipped into the hall, staying low and using the overturned tables as cover. It didn't take long to spot Neville. He was indeed hiding under a table near the far wall, his face pale with terror. "Neville!" Hermione whispered as loudly as she dared. "Come on, we'll get you out of here." But as they made their way toward him, disaster struck. Ramad's robes caught on a broken chair leg, and when he tried to free himself, the entire piece of furniture came crashing down. The troll's head swiveled toward them immediately. Its small, beady eyes fixed on the 4 students, and it let out a roar that made the windows rattle. "Oh, brilliant," Harry muttered. "Now what?" The troll began lumbering toward them, its club raised menacingly. Behind it, they could hear Dumbledore calling out, "Wait!" This could be a valuable learning opportunity. Perhaps the troll is simply trying to connect with the students. "That thing wants to connect my head with its club." Neville screeched from under his table. "Run!" McGonagall shouted from across the hall. "Students, get out of there." but there was nowhere to run. The troll was between them and the exits, and it was moving faster than something that size had any right to. "Okay," Hermione said, her voice shaking but determined. "We need to work together. Harry, you're fast, try to distract it. Rahmed, help me get Neville. What am I supposed to distract it with?" Harry demanded. "I don't know. Throw something at it." Harry grabbed a piece of broken crockery and hurled it at the troll's head. It bounced off harmlessly, but the troll turned its attention to them, which was both good and bad. Rahmed, meanwhile, was trying to coax Neville out from under the table. "Come on, man, we need to move." "I can't," Neville wailed. "I'm too scared." "You know what?" Rahmed said, suddenly sounding more determined. "Fear is a test from Allah. We face it together, yeah." Something in his voice seemed to reach Neville, who nodded shakily and crawled out from his hiding spot. The troll, frustrated by Harry's continued dodging, raised its club high above its head. Harry closed their eyes, certain they were about to be flattened. Instead, they heard Hermione shout Wingardium Leviosa, and opened their eyes to see the troll's own club floating out of its grasp and bonking it firmly on the head. The troll stood there for a moment, looking confused. Then its eyes rolled back and it toppled over like a felled tree, landing with a crash that shook the entire hall. "Bloody hell," came Snape's impressed voice from across the room. "Girl's got some serious magical skills." "Language," Professor McGonagall said automatically, but she looked equally impressed. Dumbledore emerged from behind the head table, looking slightly disappointed. "Well, I suppose that's one way to resolve conflict, though I had hoped we might achieve a more collaborative solution." "Collaborative?" McGonagall stared at him. "Albus, it's a troll. They don't collaborate. They smash things and eat people." "Every creature deserves a chance to be heard," Dumbledore said mildly. "Perhaps if we had approached this with more cultural sensitivity." "The only culture that troll understands is violence," Snape interrupted. "And these kids just proved they got more sense than you do." Harry, Rahmed, Hermione, and Neville stood in the wreckage of the Great Hall, breathing heavily and trying to process what had just happened. "Are you all right?" McGonagall asked, hurrying over to check on them. "I think so," Harry said shakily. Is it dead?" "Just unconscious," McGonagall replied. "Though I suspect he will have quite a headache when he wakes up." "We couldn't just leave Neville," Hermione explained. "We had to come back for him." "That was incredibly brave and incredibly foolish," McGonagall said, though her tone was more proud than angry. "You could have been seriously hurt." "That we weren't," Rahmed pointed out. "And we worked together. That's what matters, right?" "Indeed," Dumbledore said, approaching them with his usual serene smile. "This has been a valuable lesson in the power of collaborative problem-solving." "They knocked a troll unconscious with its own club," Snape said flatly. "Ain't nothing collaborative about that. That's just good old-fashioned violence solving problems." "Well, yes, but they worked together to achieve their goal," Dumbledore insisted. "Surely that demonstrates the importance of unity and cooperation." "What it demonstrates," McGonagall said firmly, "is that these students have excellent instincts and quick thinking under pressure. 50 points to Gryffindor for their bravery." "Each," she added, looking meaningfully at Dumbledore. As they made their way back to Gryffindor Tower, the four friends walked in comfortable silence for a while, processing the evening's events. "You know," Harry said finally, "I'm starting to think Dumbledore might not be the best person to handle crisis situations." "He means well," Hermione said diplomatically. "But maybe not every situation calls for a discussion circle." "Why think?" Rahmed said with a grin. "Though I have to admit, watching him try to negotiate with a troll while dodging flying furniture was pretty entertaining." "I still can't believe you made that club float," Neville said admiringly to Hermione. "That was incredible magic." Hermione blushed. "It was just a levitation charm. Basic first-year magic." "Basic for you, maybe," Harry said. "Most of us can barely make a feather float, let alone disarm a troll." The important thing is that we all contributed, Hermione said. Harry distracted it. Ramad helped Neville. I handled the spell. We were a team. Yeah, Ramad agreed. Turns out having different strengths and perspectives actually makes us stronger, not weaker. Who would have thought? Harry said with a smile. As they climbed the stairs to their dormitory, Harry reflected on how much had changed since that morning. They'd started the day nervous about fitting in at Hogwarts, worried about acceptance and belonging. Now, they had real friends who had literally faced danger alongside them. Maybe the wizarding world wasn't perfect, Snape's attitude certainly proved that, and maybe Dumbledore's approach to leadership left something to be desired. But at least here, Harry had found people who accepted them for who they were and were willing to stand by them when things got difficult. And if they could handle a 12-foot troll together, Harry thought, they could probably handle whatever else Hogwarts had to throw at them. Even if it involved more of Dumbledore's well-meaning but completely impractical conflict resolution techniques.